The Russian avant-gardists, like those in Paris and Italy, were driven by the idea that the 20th century was bringing into being a new world. Life would be different. Men and women would be different. The new man, the new woman. And artists would create this new world through innovative art forms. So an artist like Goncharova is celebrating the newness of electric light as part of a new form of seeing. She's using a somewhat cubist, abstracted visual language. Circles, sharp spiking forms, curving lines, suggesting the brightness, the wires, but also the startling sudden zap of the light switched on, which was entirely different from a world of candles and kerosene lamps. Keep in mind that while Edison had brought electricity to some regions of New York in 1882, by 1925, only half of all homes in the US had electric power in the home, even fewer in Russia. So electricity was not yet something people took for granted. It was the dramatic promise of controlling light, having bright light whenever you need it in a way that was not available for people using the older forms of candles and kerosene lamps. So Kazimir Malevich is thinking along similar lines in 1912 in this painting, The Knife Grinder, where he is doing what he would call Cubo-futurism. He doesn't mean he's following the Italian futurists. He's not committed to violence and misogyny in that same way. But he is thinking of the fact that a new future world is being brought into being through new kinds of machines. And this is a knife grinder using a machine. And again, we have a language of creative form that uses elements of Cubism, elements of futurism, to create dynamism, to create a sense of a spatial architecture that is incredibly complex. He's experimenting with how to represent modern perception. I would argue that his version of dynamism is more convincing and complex and interesting than many of the Italian futurists, in that his space is so complicated in its push and pull and its sense of rotation in depth and rotation forward, not just across the plane. And it's crowded with forms in a way that actually suggests the noise of the machine. Look at the repetition of fingers, suggesting the rapid fire action of making a tool, a metallic tool, a knife that is sharp. He's sort of playing with the idea that his artwork has the sharpness of a knife, a tool to cut through the old and to shape the new. Notice how the shading of the forms has the polished sleekness of metallic surfaces. Here in 1912 and 1913, Goncharova and Malevich are thinking in terms of a radically new style, but they're still thinking that their job is to depict the reality of the world in this brave new world of modernity. By 1915, Malevich takes the most radical step because he starts to negate the whole idea that you're going to actually depict a knife grinder, a tool, you're going to depict the noise and machinery of the modern world. He, in a sense, steps off the artistic cliff by making the most extreme move yet. Here, we see his black square, and he is eliminating all references to objects in nature. Quoting Malevich, he said, "In the year 1913, in my desperate attempt to free art from the burden of the object, I took refuge in the square form and exhibited a picture which consisted of nothing more than a black square on a white field." This inaugurates what he will call Supremetism, by which he speaks of this, what he calls the supremacy of pure feeling in art. So we have to ask, what is he doing? How does he get here? Why does he get here? You have a very reduced geometric shape, a two-dimensional shape, a black square. Black, one flat field of a single color, the color that is, in a sense, the negation of colors, against the other color that is its polarity, white. And it's slightly tipped, this square, in an interesting way, as if we perceive it as being possibly a figure on a ground, but not really a figure on a ground, because the shape of the square mirrors the shape of the canvas. It replicates the bare bones form of the canvas itself. There are slightly uneven edges. This is handmade, hand-drawn. So there's a kind of subtle ambiguity about this sharp geometric element. It's devoid of shading. We are confronted with the two-dimensionality of a pure shape with a pure singular color. Irreducible. Yet there's a dynamic tilt, a subtle dynamic tilt. It's not just the square on the same exact plane as the white square that is the base. So Picasso and Braque, in inventing Cubism, had joked about being the Wright brothers, but it is actually Malevich who breaks free of the gravitational pull of objects and the fundamental assumption that it is the job of painting to represent objects. This is a non-objective painting. And he works with a number of these reduced geometric forms, such as the black cross on the white field, as if he's a physicist studying the most basic elements of painting in their purest form, reducing the elements of painting to their simplest components. This is, to him, suprematism, because he is saying it is supreme, it is superior to the world of painting objects. It is above and beyond the world of nature. And so he speaks of his artworks in terms that relate to the concept of the absolute. An absolute is that which is viewed or existing independently and not in relation to other things, not relative or comparative. So this red is not anything more or less than this red tipped square on this white field. It is entirely its own world on its own terms. He also will create a white square floating weightlessly on a white field. Geometric abstraction, no reference to external reality. We do know that he was fascinated by flight, and he certainly does have the idea of what is perception from an airplane, but he's not copying that. He's not trying to imitate that. That for him is an idea that he is going to be able to fly free from the task of representing reality. And he is still making a handmade object. You can sort of see in the photograph that there is a rich texture to the layering on of the white paint. There's a kind of breathing quality, and the lines have this hand-ruled, sort of gently wavering quality. So he is absolutely fascinated with technology and the airplane and creating a sense of floating and transcendence, but we're still aware of this as being what it is. Paint, lines, paint on paint. This is what makes it, for him, a pure feeling. He said that he wanted his pictures' forms to have nothing in common with nature. He said, I have overcome the lining of the colored sky. Swim in the white, free abyss. Infinity is before you. If you're not referencing anything, if you're seeing a pure field, you are perceiving infinity, which, have humans ever been able to perceive infinity? Look at what he's claiming to do. And so he actually exhibits these works in an exhibition that is titled 010. This is a very important title. The original roster of artists was to consist of 10 people. So 10, this is the exhibition 0 of 10. So the exhibition is meant to be ground zero, the annihilation of the old forms of art and the starting point of an entirely new world of art. Remember, zero in math is the integer that suggests emptiness, a void, a starting point before the beginning. So here the idea is this is ground zero, canceling the old, proceeding by negating all known qualities. And so the part of the power of his art is the idea that it negates what art has been. And the black square is such a marvelous way of showing, demonstrating that quality of negation. Where there would be a picture is a black square, a negation of picturing. And this is a very famous moment here, this black square hung in the corner, because in traditional Russian Orthodox culture, people would have an icon, a special spiritual painting that would be hung in the corner. And an icon in the Russian Orthodox tradition is a painting of holy figures, but it's not supposed to be just a picture of holy figures. It's supposed to be an emanation of the holiness into this world. And so Malevich is actually playing with that tradition of the icon, that very religious, serious tradition, in a way that some people at the time found blasphemous, because this is a kind of icon of negation of picturing, a negation of habitual thought. And in place of the old spirituality of Christianity, it's offering a spirituality of sort of the extreme newness of the world of technology that's rising above nature, claiming that humankind is now negating its bounds to nature itself.